Hey, welcome to a Badger Beer Report special report on the Great Taste of the Midwest. The annual Great Taste of the Midwest Craft Beer Festival in Madison, known for bringing nearly 200 breweries across the region, is facing a significant challenge this year. Typically, a major draw for the 5,000 plus attendees is the chance to sample beers from out of state breweries that don't ordinarily distribute to Wisconsin. However, organizers estimate that around 40 breweries that would normally attend will be absent this year due to new steep costs associated with a change in state permitting. Efforts to find regulatory workarounds have been unsuccessful, and organizers are now scrambling to fill the void left by these breweries. And I am here with my colleague, Chris Drosner, to further jump into this issue. Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Hello, Greg. Hello, everybody. Good to be back.
Yes, Chris, you wrote a piece about this, and this is a supplement to that. So, how do we get here, Chris? And where potentially is this going? Two big questions that probably take a little bit for you to answer.
Yeah, so this goes back to a new law that we talked about quite a bit when it was being debated and decided in the Capitol, which ended up being passed in late 2023 called Act 73. And this is the big overhaul of the three-tier system in Wisconsin that did all kinds of things. It changed it allowed for these wedding barns to be legally permitted. It allowed for breweries to do it kind of codified a lot of general practices that had already been happening, but there were a bunch of other changes that happened too. One of the key things is that it created a division of basically an alcohol enforcement bureau within the division, the State Department of Revenue, to kind of handle all this stuff. And in doing that, the state didn't, so the state created this thing that needed to do these operations. What it did not do is appropriate funding from the state to do these things. It was up to the Department of Revenue to basically self-fund these new operations. And they did that by fairly reasonably, I think, putting the costs on the clients of this agency, which are breweries, wineries, basically permits that previously had no costs associated with them do now have costs. And how this all relates to the Great Taste is all of these, there's two key things. If you're a brewery in Wisconsin, you have a brewer's permit. It costs $1,000 now to get, and you actually have to put down a bond of $1,000. That's basically, it's called a surety bond that's held held by the state to ensure that you're going to pay your taxes on your excise taxes on the beer that you produce. If you're a brewery doing business in the state of Wisconsin, that's fine. You're underwriting that $1,000 into your entire brewery operations. Would they prefer to not pay the $1,000? Yes, obviously, but it's a relative drop in the bucket compared to a decent sized brewery, or even really any size brewery's operations. There is also that same permit also applies to out-of-state breweries that sell their beer here. So for the right to do business in Wisconsin, you have to get vetted, and all this stuff happens. And that permit also costs $1,000. So, and the issue is that any brewery that sells brewery in Wisconsin needs to have this permit. That includes breweries that are coming in for the Great Taste. They might be selling only 3 barrels of beer at this festival, but by state law, they have to have that permit to do so. There had been, and previously this had been free, so it was not an issue. You had to do a little bit of paperwork, but it's worth doing because you want to go to the Great Taste because it's an awesome event. I think importantly here, it's not just great for the people who go, like us, the fans of the festival goers. It's great for the breweries too, because they get to hang out with all their peers. They drink each other's beer. They meet the most avid and enthusiastic customers in the entire market, and they get to hang out in Olin Park on a Saturday in August. It's just like it's almost like a convention of brewing professionals around the Midwest. So many of these people started at other breweries and got their cut their teeth and then maybe opened their own place, or worked at a little brewery in Indiana and then now work in a bigger brewery in Chicago. All these breweries kind of come to the Great Taste. So that's why they really want to come. Aside from the whole marketing and the other reasons that breweries do festivals. So these out-of-state shippers have the same permit. It's functionally the same permit as in-state brewers, but there's so little incentive to pay $1,000. It's a 2-year permit, so it kind of amortizes to $500 a year. But that's a lot of money to come to the Great Taste and sell basically no beer. I mean, the Great Taste does pay for the beer that basically these breweries are selling beer to the Great Taste, to the festival. But you're talking about the organizers told me that essentially the cost for the permit and the surety bond and the paperwork and stuff that they need to do comes to about $1,300 to $1,400. That's on top of the travel costs, the hotel, you're paying your staff to be there. It's just a lot of money, and it's like, for a lot of brewers, it's just too much. And you might I was curious, like, how many breweries would fit in this bucket. It doesn't apply to Wisconsin breweries. It doesn't apply to big out-of-state breweries that are already selling here, like Revolution, for example. You can find them in the local bottle shop. They're already covered under their existing permit, so that doesn't matter. Even a kind of a niche brewery, a smaller brewery from wherever, if they're selling their beer here, even at like a fancy bottle shop, that they're not really shipping, you don't see them a lot, they already have that permit. So it's a relatively narrow slice, but it ends up being, Greg, about 60 breweries out of I think the last year there were about 190 plus breweries that were there. 60 of those breweries are fall within this bucket, right? And I think that those breweries are kind of in many ways what makes the Great Taste so exciting every year, because I'm thinking about like Dimensional in Dubuque. They've been really hot the last couple of years. Last year, my favorite brewery of the entire festival was Field Day, which is from a little town in Iowa. And these are breweries that are not going to be here this year because of this issue. But among these 60 breweries, there are 20 that the Great Taste organizers told me that are going to bite the bullet, pay the $1,400 or whatever it costs, and make it to the festival anyway. And a few of these, like, they were a little shy about this because a lot of it was still being locked down. But ones I know for sure are Off Color Brewing in Chicago, which if you've ever been to a Great Taste in the past like 15 years, it feels like Off Color has been there. John Laffler and his crew, they love this event, and they're coming with all their cool beers. Sorry, I got to check my story here to make sure I get this right. Square One Brewery and Distillery in St. Louis was another one, and then Blind Tiger, which is a brew pub. This Blind Tiger to me is like the perfect illustration of what we're missing in this, like, kind of donut of breweries that are really facing challenges this year. Blind Tiger is a brew pub in Topeka, Kansas. But if you've been to the Great Taste for many years, you know that Blind Tiger is there, and they've got cool beer, and they're like, there's no reason for Blind Tiger to do business in Wisconsin other than this event, and they're deciding that it's worth the $1,400 or whatever it is to make it to basically claim their spot in the Great Taste for the next 2 years. So hats off to them, and I mean that's That was a pretty deep breath that I need to take, Greg. What am I missing? I can't hear you, bud. Are you muted or something?
So why is it this year that's being affected? Because Act 73 was signed in late 23. So what? It took a year for it to be bumped in.
Yeah, these there's so many rules. The way lawmaking works is, it's passed. It was signed into law by the governor in like December 2023, but it takes the Department of Revenue a lot of time to kind of figure out how to enforce, how to create the rules around enforcing these laws, or not necessarily enforcing, but just implementing. And last year, basically the fee structure was either not in place, or, I mean, one thing I didn't really mention is that the Great Taste organizers had been kind of working with DOR for many years, dozens of years, to kind of do basically a workaround that allowed the state to basically not collect the tax revenue, because most of these breweries, like I said, the excise tax on a barrel of beer is 50 cents. We're talking about the lost tax revenue of like maybe $100 total between all of these breweries for the entire festival. And so what they were doing was essentially putting in the application ahead of time to get basically the clearance to go ahead for the brewery, for the event, and then withdrawing the application at some point, something like that. It's a little, and it wasn't like skirting the law necessarily, because there wasn't really, I mean, like the people who were doing it said fine. But once this new law came in and $1,000 was at stake, and there's this new regulatory regime that's designed so that everybody plays by the same rules, it just didn't fly. And the Great Taste organizers were working with the Department of Revenue to see if they could figure something out, and it didn't happen. The other thing that was kind of, one of the things that they were hoping for was that there would be something included in the state budget that was passed just a couple of weeks ago that would allow for this to happen, and it did not happen. So they are working on. Essentially, last year it didn't matter. This year it does matter. But as far as like what's going to happen next, I talked to Fred Swanson and Doug Randall, who are the brewery liaison and the chairman of the Great Taste, respectively. And they were pretty optimistic, I would say very optimistic, that they would be able to find a way to make this work with the Department of Revenue, or potentially a legislative fix. I mean, if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I'm going to propose a bill that establishes a festival permit," or something like that, then then the DOR doesn't have to do anything. Then there's a new thing in place, and that will be the thing that carries the day. But right now, that's not happening, and so they're looking to the future and hoping to have something in place for 2026. But one of the things that this is not the only event that has been hamstrung by this new rule this year. The Lager and Friends Festival in Milwaukee, which was that in June or last day in May, I think.
May 31st.
Yeah, that's a brewery that is much smaller, but they usually have at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 breweries that are really interested in lagers and want to be at a lager exclusive festival. So I mean, there like Freen came one year. There has been Suarez from out east. Again, these are breweries that are coming just for this festival. They're not doing business in Wisconsin otherwise. And so there's a case to be made that there maybe should be like a festival permit where, the Great Taste like the organizers of these festivals basically are the ones responsible for the tax or the whatever, And for that one day at this one event, it's kind of anything goes as far as who can sell in that event. I don't know. That seems like it took a lot to get this bill passed, and I don't know what the legislative appetite, especially in the environment that we are in, that's not super bipartisan right now, to put it mildly. I'm not sure what the appetite for that is going to be. So that would be great, but I think that's going to require legislation, and I don't know if I'm super optimistic about that.
Let me put my beer geek hat on. Say, this is a question that maybe someone has is, so why can't the Great Tasters pay for this?
To pay for the
permits, because the Great Taste donates a bunch of money to charity, meaning there's a profit here, but obviously they don't have enough for 60 breweries.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nonprofit event, and I think they are very carefully attuned to what the to being fair to everybody, and if I don't know, I mean, maybe fairness, equity, I don't know how this all kind of plays out, but I mean, the bottom line is 60 grand. Every year the festival donates about $35,000 to local charities.
Yep.
And that's something that's really important to them. It is a nonprofit festival. It is entirely run by volunteers. So this is not a big money. I mean, it's a big money event because there's a lot of people and the tickets are what, $75.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of money, but it is not a profitable thing. It exists to do good in the community and to kind of be a great event for beer lovers and for breweries. So there's just not the money to do that.
So when you talk to the organizers, I know you asked this question. What is the taste going to look like this year as compared to previous years?
Yeah, so I mean, Fred is working really well. Everybody, I think, is working really hard to backfill this void that was created by this issue. So basically, they said they're looking for about 40 breweries. I think a lot of those will be and the field of breweries that you can choose from to do that are Wisconsin breweries who weren't already coming, and regional breweries that you can find in bottle shops or whatever that have this permit. So I think they're pretty attuned to it. This is tough because it's a big summer's a very busy time for breweries. A brewery that was not planning on coming to the Great Taste because it's a difficult thing to get in. There's a long wait list. We know this. If you're not planning on it, you might not have the special beers that the Great Taste always insists on you bringing. You don't want to show up with just your Kolsch and your IPA. Like, that's not what this is. This is it's a prestige event, and I think they're trying to figure out how to get breweries that seem like they belong at the Great Taste. This is my analysis of what they were. There's a lot of reading between the lines of what they said here by me, but I think I think this is not how they frame it. But I think they're kind of trying to figure out how to get bodies in the tents, so to speak, but also really keep the beer and the excitement at a high level, because you're missing some really cool breweries that would otherwise be coming. But this Saturday may be spoken for a lot of the other breweries that might be coming. Especially on kind of relatively short notice. I mean, they knew this was coming, but I think they were still holding out that they were that something would basically there would be a regulatory resolution of it.
Let me throw into the staffing issue that some breweries have. Meaning, if you take staff away and put them on a brew fest, some breweries don't have that, that commodity of human capital that could, man the brewery, which is going to be again a weekend in August, which is a big weekend. You know what I mean? You're certainly going to make
Yep.
money that weekend as opposed to one of those weekends in February or January. So that,
Yeah,
that plays into fact too, for sure,
what
especially for
how
the
many
smaller ones.
what's the latest number in the brewery report that we're at with breweries? It's like 200. It's well over 200, right?
260, I believe, is where we're
260 in Wisconsin. So those are, I mean, and figure maybe 80 or 65, some dozens of those were already planning on coming. So you
Yep.
can't tap that. And then what is the biggest type of brewery what is the biggest number of the type of brewery that is the most represented in the leftover are really small breweries that might have 4 employees, and if they want to keep their tap room open, which they do on a Saturday in August, they're going to have to figure out a way to send volunteers or send a guy or gal or what, I mean, it is a big challenge to kind of, figure out a way to do this. If you're not planning on it, it's tough to do it. I mean, we've talked to the guys from Venture about this. It's tough to do it if you do know that you're coming,
Yep. And there's also the aspect that needs to be said is that I don't know if it's frowned upon or just don't allow, but the Great Taste does not. They frown upon contract brewers. So you have to be an in-house brewer. You can't be brewing your beer elsewhere. So that takes some more off the table. Because we know there's numerous breweries that use other people's brewing equipment to produce their own beers. So there's that aspect too.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a
there's a whole bunch of
really,
different there's a whole bunch of different things here though in play is
yeah.
really the point though. Not
As
to
much,
focus on one thing.
yeah, and as much as I mean, and I'll say, Doug and Fred were really adamant that they believe that this will be to the festival goer, that this will be a seamless, like it really won't be super obvious, and if you didn't know it, you wouldn't recognize it. I'm not quite sure about that, but I also think that, Greg, I mean, how many how many breweries can you visit at the Great Taste? You've been there.
Yeah,
You can't do 190 breweries. You can't do 100 breweries. Trust me, I've tried.
yeah.
It's a bad
Well,
scene. So, and especially if you're going to get like a couple beers from each one, you, there's going to be plenty of awesome beer to go through. It's just that what these missing breweries bring to the festival is that level of unexpectedness and exploration, and the next up and coming thing. That was the thing that struck me about Field Day, a brewery that I had never heard of, and we're just popping out these banging Czech lagers. They were doing Milko pours on, at the festival. It was awesome, and that hurts a little bit. But dude, maybe it's 2 stops at Three Sheeps or Central Waters, or pick your poison, 3 Floyds instead. I mean,
but yeah.
and plus, like, again, Blind Tiger is going to be there, Off Color is going to be there, so you're still going to have some of that. It's just you're
Well,
not
yeah,
going to have as much of it.
we're talking the difference between 190 and basically 150. Basically, is where we're at.
Well, and that's not even counting the breweries that they fill in,
Sure,
from
sure.
backfill with, which they didn't really estimate how many. Fred didn't really want to say how many of those they'd be able to lock in, but it's not going to be 0, and it's probably going to be. I would imagine it's going to be more than 20. So that's just
Right.
that's a drop in the Great Taste bucket. That's a drop in the dump bucket, Greg. There you go. That's clever.
Yeah, and I don't know, beer geeks and people who pay attention to this stuff, we're all about the numbers and all that. But your average Great Taste Festival fan goer who just shows up every year,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think is going to, at the end of the day, be leaving saying, "Oh, I missed those 5 breweries." You know what I mean? They may say, "Hey, man, it's bad that we didn't see." I know
Yeah.
Dovetail is going to be there probably, but Dovetail will be an example. Just this is a random brewery. Like they may be missing one or two here, but as you said, I think what's left and overall, sometimes Chris, you know, when the tough gets tough, the tough get going, and the Great Taste Group, they're a great group, and they've faced adversity all throughout this. That's the last time we have to say is the COVID year, and recovering from COVID, and they seem to have recovered from COVID very well, bounced back pretty hard, pretty quickly, and they were, the 1 or 2 years they were compromised there. But so I suspect that this will be just a blip on the screen for this year. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. What are your thoughts on that?
That's exactly how I feel. I feel like this is a kind of an anomaly and a kind of a weird thing that'll happen this year. I mean, that first festival after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, I guess, after in 2021, was noticeably different. I mean, they really limited the crowd in, and it's not going to be nearly that noticeable. I would be really surprised if anybody, the other thing is that these tickets are already all spoken for. So, and I think they're a little concerned that, like, hey, we don't want, everybody already spent their money on these tickets, and often their time waiting in line or whatever, expecting a certain experience, and it may be slightly different than what those folks were expecting. I kind of think that if you didn't know that this was an issue and you're paying attention to it by, like, consuming beer media like this, that it might not even be noticeable. That's really kind of where I land on it.
Especially by the time that Doug and Fred and crew get done with what they're doing. I think the masking, for lack of a better word, and the scrambling I set up at the top, I think that's going to bear fruit. Enough fruit that what I mean. It won't be noticeable at all, and it's just a great festival. So just get caught up once you get in. You just get caught up in who's there, what's going on, and you just sink into it. And you know what I mean? Like, no one's going to be leaving saying, "Man, I missed those 30 breweries." I just don't see it. Even if it's 30, even if it's that much.
Oh, you have something to say about the Great Taste?
So, Chris, anything else you feel so we can wrap this up? I would like to say before Chris gets to the summaries that the Great Taste of the Midwest, y'all, is on Saturday, August 9th in Olin Park in Madison. Tickets sold out in May, y'all. So it's not really even a ticket thing. We don't have to be concerned about, are people going to buy tickets now that there's 30 less breweries or whatever? No. We already got that taken care of, and everybody's ready to go. And y'all can find the official form of the festival. It has a private Facebook group, Great Taste of Midwest. Y'all can find that on Facebook. The greattaste.org, I believe, is the you can find it through Google. I'm pretty sure it's greattaste.org, though, is the
website. It is.
To find all the information on everything. Chris, do you have anything up in summary here?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of looking ahead to next year's festival, I should mention that Fred and Doug were both really, the way that they described working with the Department of Revenue on this was collaborative, and, like, they were not, like, pissed that the government was screwing them over. I mean, I think that kind of feeds into their optimism for next year and figuring out a way to make it happen. This is not really, this is not big government screwing up the beer festival. I think I think it was a largely unforeseen consequence of this really broad and complicated law that had a lot of elements to it, and they are making it work, and they're going to try to make it work, get it. They were really emphatic that they're going to be able to get it back to what it was last year for next year.
Yeah, and this is how a lot of these bills work, Chris, where sometimes it takes a while for it, not sometimes, all the time, it takes a while for it to kick in. And sometimes the unintended consequences or consequences kick in, and we find out later that, whoa, this is an issue here. So we almost find it when it's implemented that it's an issue, and a lot of times whatever industry is affected starts to has to adjust. So this feels like an adjustment. And because again, overall, for the most part, most people have still a generally favorable view of this bill
Mhm.
in the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
So,
And
from
I'll
what
say
we
one other thing I'll say about this is if you are listening this far into a relatively complicated issue, or a stream about this relatively complicated issue, you are probably going to the Great Taste. And if you see me at the Great Taste, say hi. We will. I'd love to toast you and find out what your favorite beer of the festival was. I love doing that at all these festivals, but especially the Great Taste. So say hi. Say hi to him. Say hi to me.
will be here, I'll
Yeah,
be here too. My
that's right.
first time since 2021. So
Yep.
first time since 2021. Good times, Chris. Chris, thank you. That's everything, buddy.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, y'all, for joining us on this Badger Beer Report special report on the Great Taste and Act 73. Cheers.